Have you dreamed about writing and publishing a novel, but you don't know where to start? Today's episode of Answering the Call to Write is dedicated to all my fiction writers out there. I'm speaking to the amazing award-winning author, Sarah Hanks. She has published over 8 novels, and she is going to share her process, her journey, and get you started on that process of writing your novel. So if that's you today, stick around. You don't want to miss this episode. Welcome, awesome authors. You are listening to the Answering the Call to Write podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Farndale, and this episode is brought to you by Paper Crown Media. Hello, awesome authors, and welcome to this episode of Answering the Call to Write. I'm your host, Melissa Farndale, and with me today is an award-winning fiction writer, Sarah Hanks, and I'm so excited to get to chat to her today, and you are going to absolutely love getting to know Sarah. So she is an award-winning author of the Mercy series. She's written 8 books. Is that right, Sarah? Have I counted all of them? 8?
Yeah.
Wow. And her book, A Battle with Fighting, won the bronze prize in this year's Illumination Book Awards in the Enduring Light division. But not only is she a prolific writer and author, she is raising a family of 11. Did I count that right as well?
Yeah, nine children. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah. Nine children.
9 children. Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. And she also runs or writes Sunday school curricula for the churches in her community. So, Sarah, I feel like this needs to be a conversation about where did you get the extra 6 hours a day? Where did you find the time to do all of that?
Well, I don't write the curriculum anymore. That was
Okay.
before I switched over to full-time writing. So that was my past life.
Okay.
Before I did writing full-time. And I was able to, I actually switched over to taking writing professionally after I got really sick with POTS,
Right.
chronic illness. And then I switched over to writing because I couldn't do, I was a director of children's ministry. I was doing all that stuff for over a decade. And then I couldn't anymore. So I switched over to being a full-time author after that. And then the Lord healed my body. But I'm still writing.
That's awesome. I love that. What inspired you to pick up your pen in the first place?
Well, I've always wanted to be a writer. I've always written. I mean, I was a kid that had, 20 notebooks with scribbles all in it and everything. I didn't really take myself very seriously. I didn't think that it could amount to much. I became a Christian when I was 11. And I got saved. I was reading 40 chapters of the Bible a day. And I thought at that time in my maturity that because I was now a believer, that meant that I needed to be a pastor because that's what, a Christian should do. And so in high school, I had it set like that I was going to go to Bible college, and a counselor called me into her office, and the principal was there and the counselor was there, and they sat me down with my English essay. And she said, God would not want you to waste this gift on Bible college. She's like, this is not what God wants for you. You need to use this gift. And that kind of got me thinking differently of like, is that true? Wait, God doesn't want all Christians to be pastors. For some reason, I had that in my head, that all good believers should be pastors. Wait, no, that doesn't actually work.
That's funny.
That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And so that kind of got me thinking differently about, how God wanted to use the body of Christ. And I had always kind of known that my leading from the Lord was to strengthen the body of Christ, as opposed to more of an evangelical gifting, that I was called to the body, but that's how I'm using my gifting now. But that's how I use my gifting, with children's ministry, working with the children. And that's still how I use my gifting with the writing, because I do write Christian fiction. So I'm using my novels to speak truth into believers and to strengthen the body of Christ that way.
I love that. And I'm going to go through all of these beautiful novels that you've written and just look at the message behind each series. And each book, because I just think that is such a wonderful way to actually reach the hearts of people with the message of grace and God's love. So I absolutely love that this is what you are called to, and this is what you're doing, and you've stepped and embraced that so beautifully. So tell me a little bit about the Mercy series. Was that your first series?
With the Mercy series, okay, so I wrote kind of like on the side, right, while I was doing all the other stuff. So
Yes.
I wrote a book that I don't talk about. I published when I was 17. It sounds like a 17-year-old wrote it, right? So I took that out of publication, and I won't even mention the name. You don't even know about that one,
Right,
okay?
right.
About that. All right. And then I published Drifting In and Out of Sleep, which actually did pretty well. And that was on the side too, right?
Right.
I redid that one. That one is now known as Awakened to Life. So we can talk about
Okay.
that one.
Awesome.
But that
Yeah.
one's still out there. And then on the side, I did Freshly Cut Grass. I don't really talk about that one very much either. Those were my like hobby projects or whatever, the ones that I was doing while I was doing other things, well, when I didn't consider myself like that this was my career, that this was what I was doing with my life. And so the Mercy series is when I was like, okay, I'm going to start taking myself seriously. I'm going to start taking this leading from the Lord seriously. So that's what I consider my debut. When I
Awesome.
finally stepped into this, was Mercy Will Follow Me. That was published in 2020. And so that's a 3-book series: Mercy Will Follow Me, Mercy's Song, Mercy's Legacy. And yeah, that would be what I would consider my debut series. And that follows, it's got 2 contemporary storylines. So I write split time mostly, except for one book is a time slip. But so I have contemporary storylines running next to historical storylines. So I have 2 contemporary storylines in the Mercy series. I have Natasha's story and I have DeAndre's story. And then I have a historical storyline from Mercy Will Follow Me is in the 1820s, which is a enslaved girl, mulatto enslaved girl, and she's young in that storyline. In Mercy's Song, she's older. In Mercy's Legacy, she's actually, the older mother, and it's really about her daughter. So that's the historical storyline on there. So it's really 3 stories in one, kind of. And Mercy Will Follow Me. And it's a grittier story. It's a tough story about rape, about the pressure for abortion. And it deals with racism. It deals with kind of all of that kind of grittier stuff, but it is the hope behind all of that and how Jesus walks us through that. It's walking through the forgiveness and healing. And the reason I wanted it to be a series is because I think sometimes in in the Western Christianity and in Christian fiction, we can kind of have this, the book's kind of got to wrap up. We only have so far. So we make forgiveness seem really simple and easy and like trite,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, forgiveness is a choice. So I forgive you and we move on and what's happily ever after. Well, I mean, the Lord can do like a miraculous work in our hearts where it works like
Yes.
that, but more often than not, it's more of a process than that, right?
Yes.
Because the
Yeah.
Lord has to do something in our hearts for
Right.
us to be able to extend forgiveness to
Mhm.
somebody else. It's Him working through us to be able, healing our hearts, for us to be able to extend that grace and healing to other people. And it often doesn't happen like that overnight instant thing. It can, because God can do anything and he can do it that way. But more often than not, it's this process that he walks us through. So for me to be able to show Natasha's process of her working through this very traumatic thing, which I didn't want to take lightly or to treat like as a trite thing. I wanted to walk in respect towards women who have been through such trauma, and not treat it as, oh, just forgive the person, move on. I wanted to treat this with, the weight that it deserves.
Yeah.
This is a process, and it was a process that needed 3 books,
Yeah.
to get through, where she walked through it, a little by little, each book, and there were layers of healing that came along.
You wrote A Battle Worth Fighting first, did you say? That was your first storybook?
Um, it was, well, Awaken to Life.
Oh, Awaken to Life.
Awaken to
Sorry.
Life. Yeah, no, yeah. It was first published as Drifting In and Out of Sleep in 2006.
Right.
Yeah. And then I
Wow.
read that one and republished it as Awaken to Life.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about Awaken to Life. What is your heart behind that book and who is it for?
Awaken to Life is a pro-life novel. It's very pro-life, so I say that up front, right? So I don't want
Yes.
any like 1-star review. I didn't know this was a pro-life.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what you're getting into when you read it, okay? It's a
yeah,
pro-life book.
yeah.
If you don't want a pro-life book, don't read it. Uh, it is about a woman who is going in for an abortion, and a woman who is standing outside the abortion clinic praying for the people going in for abortion. And Eve, who is praying, meets Lisa, who is going in for the abortion, and Eve offers to adopt Lisa's baby.
Right.
So right there outside of the abortion clinic. So it's about these two women, Eve and Lisa, and they develop this relationship as they're going on. Eve's adopting Lisa's baby, and they're getting to know each other, and they're getting to discover all about these struggles. And it's written from multiple points of view, because we also have Trent is the abortion doctor that works there. So we have his point of view, and his wife, Beth, and they end up pregnant too. So there's this, whoa, how can I be excited for my own baby when I am going into in the lives of these other babies, and all of this. So it's a very plot driven novel. You're wondering, is Lisa gonna end up keeping this baby? What's gonna
Yeah.
happen here? Eve is very, is very bold and very vocal about her beliefs. Lisa is coming into this as a unbeliever with a harder, background. So that's what that one is about. And I wrote that actually before we had ever adopted, which is funny because I remember writing to an adoption coordinator, and I was like, I don't know what I'm writing with the home study. And she's like, for somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, you did a very good job. Because I was asking her to review it or whatever. And now I read it, I was like, oh, I did do a very good job, because now I've been through this a couple times, because we've adopted a couple times. And I'm like, this is pretty accurate of the feelings you go through when you when you're doing a home study.
Then you wrote Fall Back and Find Me. Do you want to tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about that?
Fall Back and Find Me. Okay, so Awaken, or A Battle Worth Fighting and Fall Back and Find Me are both Sisters in Arm novels. So and I'm working on the third one right now, Whatever It Takes. So those books feature in the historical storyline, they're split time. So they feature a female Civil War soldier. So a lot of
Right.
people don't know that there were female Civil War soldiers, but there were women who disguised themselves as men and fought in the Civil War. So all three of those books feature a woman that disguised herself as a man to fight the Civil War for various reasons. There were so many different reasons that women did that. And Fall Back and Find Me has Willow's story there. The modern day contemporary storyline has Amber, and Amber has POTS, which is what I had, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is a chronic illness that causes people oftentimes to pass out. So
Right.
I dealt with POTS for 7 years. I was passing out 3 to 4 times a week. I was bedridden for a while, for months. I was bedridden. I, I couldn't peel potatoes. I was too weak to peel potatoes, to cut a watermelon. I couldn't do it.
Right.
I couldn't, go to my kids, events, all of that kind of stuff. I had to use a walker. I used a walker to get around, when I could get around again. So I had to have IV transfusions for years. So after going through this chronic illness, I was like, I know I need to write a story about this because it's very, very underrepresented in fiction. So Amber has that, and then Willow has what they called back then irritable heart,
Right.
which presents a lot like POTS. It was kind of a lot of irritable heart, was POTS. That was kind of the condition, and it started. A lot of people in the Civil War were diagnosed with irritable heart. So they're both kind of dealing with the same health issue, in that. So that one is it's a very heart tugging kind of read about chronic illness, but it's the main theme of it is finding your identity in the Lord, that only Jesus can tell you who you are. And yeah, that's the main theme of that story.
That's amazing. And what I love so much, hearing you talk about that adoption process and, you're going through this chronic illness, like just how God has used these experiences in your life to bring redemption, to speak to the hearts of women and, your readers. And it's just so inspiring to know that whatever we're going through, we can use that to really reach and speak to the hearts of the people who are reading our books, whether we're writing nonfiction or fiction, because sometimes we can think fiction is just about the story itself, but there's such a deep message behind the stories that you are writing. And I just love that so much. So, can we talk just very briefly about Braving Strange Waters?
Yeah, Braving Strange Waters, that was a super fun one to write. That's my first time slip. So instead of having two
Hmm.
separate storylines, a contemporary and a historical, that one, the character goes from the contemporary to the historical. So she travels in time. It's got that speculative element there, the magical, element of her traveling through the elevator back to the 1856. Had to think for a minute. So that was something completely different and completely new. Well, it's not too different because I still got those two different, storylines. I got the contemporary storyline, got the historical storyline, but it's just that different bit of an element there. But it was something fresh and something new. That was kind of my new project that I got to do while we were doing a new adoption. Um, while we were adopting a new baby, I just needed something fresh and new after writing this heavy story of Fall Back and Find Me. That was a hard one to write, and I wanted to write something lighter. So this was light, fresh, fun, but it still does cover the brave topic of racism, of Stella not standing up for what was right. And she gets a second chance when she goes back in time, and she gets to help these slaves escape. So it was kind of like that, second chances. It was her relying on the Lord for courage instead of on her own strength. And so it still gets to those, heavier, deeper topics while remaining kind of light and fun.
And I think you've got another book upcoming book as well. I saw on your website, New
Yeah, New
Creations.
Creations. Yes, New Creations is coming August 16th. So that's coming up super fast. That one is honoring my grandpa. So
Oh,
that was fun. It's not a memoir, but I took a lot of our his family stories. He is just a gem. He is hilarious. He spent, all these years as a barber, and had just hilarious stories that have been passed through our family, that are like our famous family stories. And I'm like, people got to hear these because they're just great. He's a legend. I'm like, I have to share these stories. So it is fictionalized, but it's got a lot of those true stories in there. So this is one that is nostalgic. It'll make you laugh. It might make you tear up. It'll make you want to hug your own grandpa or your own family members. It's kind of one of those feel good stories.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Will it be published on Amazon, or
Yes,
how
yeah.
how do we get copies of your books?
On, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, they're wherever
Okay.
books are sold. You can also get them from my website, but yeah.
Yeah. So I'll put all the links in the description for everybody who wants to know how to connect with Sarah and how to get her books. So Sarah, I want to ask you just a little bit about your process. When you decide to write a book, like where do you go or where do you start when you've got this idea for a novel and now you want to sit down and write it? What is the process you follow to get from point A, idea, to point B, publish, author?
What I normally start, well, it depends. I guess it depends on the book. It's some books start more as a plot heavy idea. Where I find a interesting tidbit in history. I guess like my Sisters in Arm books, I didn't know that women fought in the Civil War. And so when I go to the library with my kids and I sit down in the little children's nonfiction section and I start pulling out books and I start looking through those books and I was like, oh, so I found that in a children's nonfiction book. And I was like, this is interesting. So then I go to the library website and I just pull a bunch of books about that topic and I just start reading about that topic and see what sparks, what kind of sparks ideas. And is there enough material here to actually find a story? Because some ideas are like seem like a good idea, but then when you get into that, there's just not enough out there. It just is not gelling. You're like, okay, there's just not enough here to come up with a story, at least not yet. So maybe
Mhm.
that just goes in a file and we'll revisit that later. But if there's enough things to like start sparking, then I'll go home. I'll like go on Amazon. I'll see if I can find these books used and cheap because I want to mark all over them. I don't want to read a library book, and take notes. I want to like write in the ebook and highlight it and dog ear it and everything. And I don't like to do that to pretty new books. And I don't want to spend $30 on a book that I'm going to do that to. I
Yeah.
want to spend $3.50 on a book that I'm going to mark up. So I'll look and I'll get, 4, 5, 6 books that I can do that to, if that's a historical idea, and get all of that kind of information there. And from there, I will be like, okay, what kind of character would could I put in the situation that would cause the most drama, the most conflict? Like, who could I put here that would cause the most friction and make it the most interesting? Um, so that's one way. Other stories are more character
Mhm.
driven. So I will be thinking of a person and I'll just kind of start to get to know this person and I will think about them and I will ask them questions. They're like my imaginary friend. I'll talk to my imaginary friend and I'll be like, like, how did you grow up? What was your relationship with your dad like? I'll I'll ask them questions and I'll get to know this person. And then I will be like, okay, like what situation could I put you in that would be the most interesting? So it kind of depends on which way it's coming at. I've come at stories both ways.
Wow, that's really cool. So then once you've got your concept and your characters, how long does it normally take you to write your manuscript?
Let's say let's average like 4 months, maybe, if I'm writing 60, 80, yeah, 4 or 5 months
Right.
to from beginning to end if of actual writing. And then have I have beta readers read it. I have critique partners, go over it, and then they send it back, and then I make revisions and all of that. And then I have it edited, and then I get that back and I make revisions, and then I have it proofread, and then I get that back and I make corrections, and then I have it formatted. And yeah, so it's a lot of, that back and forth. It's about a year probably process for
Mm.
me. I know some people write faster, some people write slower, but from start to totally finished, it's probably about a year process for me.
And do you have like a very strict schedule for your writing to be able to get this done? Because I know being a busy mom and with that big family and all of those responsibilities, do you have like specific time set out? How do you manage your time?
I wish I did. I did have a strict schedule until we got a baby.
Oh, bless.
Until we adopted Hero, our baby, and then everything went out the window. So, I was very structured and planned, and now I have to be flexible. So I have a weekly word count goal, and I just know that I need to meet that word count goal by the end of the week, and I have to like look at that week and figure out when can I possibly do this. And sometimes, there's school events and doctor's appointments and everything throughout the week. And I'm like, the only day I have is Saturday. So I like tell my husband, like, I can only write on Saturday. So I do, the total 6,000 words that I have to get done that week on just on Saturday. Um, and sometimes I can do 1,000 words a day, or, whatever I have to do. It just kind of depends on that week. So I've had to be a lot more flexible since getting another little one.
Imagine. Oh my goodness. So that's super awesome. So there are some questions I ask all the authors that I interview. So I'll ask them very quickly. First of all, what do you love most about being an author?
Um, oh, I just love the creative process. I love doing this with the Lord. I love just asking God, like, okay, what are we gonna do today? Like, what are we gonna what do we get to do today together? And making it this fun process that I get to collaborate with the Lord to bring something into fruition. This creative process, that it's partnership, and I absolutely adore that.
That's awesome. Awesome. And what is the most challenging part for you of being an author?
Actually doing it. Not talking about it, not brainstorming it, not thinking up the ideas, but actually sitting down and actually doing the work
Yes. Yeah.
is the hard part.
And then I have one more question. What advice would you give someone who is they have this idea for a novel, but they don't know where to start? What would you tell them?
I would tell them that to sit down and just write. That a lot of times people don't start because they have this idea that it needs to be better or perfect, or that they need to have everything figured out. Um, and never gonna you're never gonna have a perfect rough draft. So
Yes.
you can't edit, they say you can't edit a blank page. You can't, you need to, I mean, there's prep work, which we'll talk about, in this bonus session that we're going to do, what the prep work is. And that's important. But at some point, you just got to sit down and you got to do it. You got to get
Yes.
it out. And if you don't get it out, you're not going to be able to, fix it. So if you are waiting, to have everything perfected before you start, you're never going to start. So
Amen to that.
just start.
Yes. Just start. I love that advice. because life happens and it's always going to be too busy and there's always going to be other things that's going to take priority. But if you don't start, I love that. If you don't start and just write, then you don't have anything to fix. It doesn't have to be perfect. I love that, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And I'm so excited. Sarah's going to share with us in the Paper Crown Media subscription her process for researching. If you're interested in that, there is a link below where you can join Paper Crown Media. I'm also adding all Sarah's links. So go and check out her books. They sound absolutely amazing. You can connect with Sarah as well. Her details are in the description. Sarah, I'm looking forward to talking more about your process, and thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Sarah, for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Right, I'll see you in the Paper Crown Media subscription. Remember to subscribe, like, follow, share, do all of the things. It helps us get a broader reach with this podcast, and our heart is to help you write, publish, and promote the message that is burning in your heart. See you next week.